Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been carrying extra weight for as long as I could remember. At my heaviest, I must have been close to 420 pounds, maybe more. It wasn't something I talked about much, but it was always there, affecting everything I did. About a year and a half before everything changed, I started making small adjustments. Nothing dramatic, just trying to be more mindful about what I ate and moving a bit more when I could. The weight came off slowly, maybe a pound here and there. After 18 months of this, I'd managed to drop down to around 370 pounds. It felt like progress, even if it was gradual. Then the pandemic hit. I work in healthcare, which meant I was right in the thick of everything. The stress was unimaginable. Every day brought new challenges, new fears, new losses. I already struggled with some mental health issues before all this started, but the pandemic pushed me past my breaking point. I just collapsed inward. Food stopped mattering. I stopped mattering, in a way. Some days I'd eat a biscuit or maybe a carrot, and that would be it. Sometimes I'd go days without eating anything substantial at all. I knew it wasn't healthy. I knew it wasn't sustainable, but I couldn't bring myself to care. 6 months passed like that. When I finally stepped on a scale, I'd lost another 126 pounds. I was down to around 252 pounds. The weight loss that had taken me 18 months before happened in half the time, but for all the wrong reasons. Eventually, things stabilized a bit. I started eating more normally again, though the weight continued to come off, just much slower now. Then I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which added another layer to everything I was dealing with. When restrictions finally lifted and I could see people again, I wasn't prepared for the reactions. The first time it happened, I was at the grocery store. An old colleague from before I'd switched departments spotted me in the produce section. She said she almost didn't recognize me and that I looked amazing. I thanked her and mentioned it had been a rough couple of years. She went on about how much weight I'd lost and asked what my secret was, saying she'd been trying to lose 20 pounds for ages. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just smile and say something vague about diet and exercise, but something about the way she asked, so bright and eager, assuming it was all positive, made me tell the truth. I told her I'd had a mental breakdown during lockdown and basically stopped eating for 6 months. The smile froze on her face. Her eyes went wide and I could see her trying to figure out what to say. She apologized and said she didn't realize. Then she hurried away, leaving her cart in the middle of the aisle. It kept happening. At the pharmacy, at the post office, even at medical appointments. People I hadn't seen in 2 years would light up when they saw me, congratulating me on my transformation. One afternoon I ran into 3 former co-workers at a cafe. They descended on me like I was a celebrity. One of them said I was half the size I used to be. Another asked what diet I was on and insisted I had to tell them. The third asked if I'd gotten surgery because her sister had been thinking about it. I told them no surgery, that I'd just stopped eating during lockdown because I was having a mental breakdown. The silence that followed was deafening. They all stared at me like I just told them I'd committed a crime. One of them said that wasn't healthy. I agreed and said I knew that I hadn't been in a healthy place. Another one said I looked so good now though. I told her that looking good and being healthy aren't always the same thing. They made excuses to leave shortly after that. My own family wasn't much better. At a small gathering, my aunt spent 10 minutes gushing about how wonderful I looked. She said I must feel so much better and that all that weight I'd been carrying around must have been terrible for my joints. I told her I felt about the same, honestly, maybe a bit worse in some ways. She insisted I shouldn't be modest and that I'd accomplished something incredible. She wanted to know what the trick was. I said mental illness and starvation. Her face fell. She actually took a step back from me. She said she was just trying to be supportive. I told her I knew, but that this wasn't really something to celebrate. The worst was when a distant cousin approached me at another family event. She'd been overweight herself for years and was clearly hoping I discovered some magic solution. She begged me to tell her how I did it, saying she'd tried everything and nothing worked. I told her I really didn't think my method was something she'd want to try. She insisted I shouldn't gatekeep and to share the secret. I'd had enough. I told her fine that I'd had a complete mental breakdown while working in healthcare during a global pandemic. I explained that I'd developed severe depression and anxiety. I said I stopped eating for 6 months because I couldn't find the will to care whether I lived or died. I told her I lost 9 stone that way, then got diagnosed with diabetes. I said that was the secret. She went pale. Tears actually filled her eyes. She said she didn't know and that she was sorry. I told her everyone was sorry after they found out, but nobody asked before assuming it was a success story. Eventually, I stopped being honest about it. The horrified reactions, the uncomfortable silences, the way people would suddenly remember they had somewhere else to be, it was exhausting. Now when people ask, I just say I changed my eating habits and leave it at that. It's easier than watching their faces fall when they realize that what they see as an achievement was actually me falling apart. The weight loss continues. Slower now. I'm eating properly and working with doctors to manage the diabetes, but every compliment feels hollow. A reminder that people only see the outside. They see the smaller body and assume it means success, health, happiness. They have no idea what it actually cost. I lost my mom to cancer right before I turned 17. She raised me by herself my whole life, so it was always just the two of us against the world. When she died, I felt like someone had ripped out half of my soul. Everything felt empty and wrong. The wake was held a few days after she passed. The funeral home set everything up in the typical way. My mom was laid out at the front of the room in her casket. Our family lined up along one side so people could come through and offer their condolences. There was a seating area in the middle with rows of chairs for visitors to sit and pay their respects. The whole thing felt like I was watching it happen to someone else. I was there physically, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. People kept coming through in waves. My mom had so many friends from work and different social circles. Everyone had something nice to say about her. They told me how kind she was, how funny, how she always knew how to make people feel better. I nodded and thanked people automatically, not really hearing the words. My brain felt like it was wrapped in cotton. Nothing seemed real. When there was a quiet moment between visitors, I sat down in one of the chairs. I stared at nothing, trying to figure out how I was supposed to keep going without her. She was my entire world. Every decision I made, every plan for the future, had included her. Now I had to figure out how to exist in a world where she didn't. That's when I noticed 2 kids approaching the casket. A girl and a boy, both around 8 years old or so. Their mom followed behind them. I had no idea who she was or how she knew my mom, but that wasn't unusual. My mom seemed to know everyone. The 3 of them stood at the casket for a minute. The kids looked up at their mom, then back at my mom. They whispered something I couldn't hear. Then they walked away and sat down in the chairs. More people came through the line. I stood back up and went through the motions again. Handshakes, hugs. People thanked me for having the wake. I told them my mom would have appreciated them being here. All the phrases you're supposed to say. The crowd thinned out again after a while. I looked over and saw the 2 kids approaching the casket again. This time their mom wasn't with them. She was across the room talking to some other people. The kids stood there for maybe 30 seconds, then walked back to the seating area. They sat down next to their mom and whispered to each other, giggling quietly. A few minutes passed. The kids got up and went to the casket a 3rd time, but this time they didn't walk. They did that fast shuffle walk that kids do when they want to run, but no, they'll get in trouble if they do. They rushed past where my family was standing in the receiving line. When they hurried by me, I heard one of them whisper excitedly that they had touched her. The other kid whispered back with the same excitement, saying they had done it too. Something snapped inside me. All the grief and pain and anger that had been building up suddenly found a target. These kids were treating my mom's body like it was some kind of game, like she was a prop in their entertainment. My mom, who had spent her whole life being kind to everyone, was being used as a dare by 2 bored children whose mother couldn't be bothered to supervise them. I stood up fast enough that my chair scraped loudly against the floor. I yelled at them to have some respect. My voice came out louder than I intended, echoing through the quiet room. I told everyone this wasn't the place to let kids run around playing touch the dead body. The entire room went silent. Everyone turned to look. Some stared at me, some looked at the kids, some looked at their mother. The kids started crying right away. I'm not sure if it was because I yelled or because they realized they'd been caught doing something wrong. Their faces went red and tears streamed down their cheeks. Their mom's expression went through several changes in rapid succession. First shock, then anger. She looked like she'd just bitten into the sourest lemon on earth. Her mouth opened like she was about to say something back to me, but then she seemed to think better of it. Maybe she realized that yelling at a grieving kid at his mother's wake would make her look even worse than she already did. She closed her mouth, let out a loud huff, grabbed both kids by their hands, and walked toward the exit. The kids stumbled after her, still crying. The moment they were gone, I felt all the energy drain out of me. My hands were shaking. I couldn't stay in that room with everyone staring at me. I turned and walked quickly toward the back door of the funeral home. Outside, the cool air hit my face. I leaned against the brick wall and tried to breathe. My heart was pounding. Part of me felt justified. Those kids had been disrespectful and their mom should have been watching them. But another part of me wondered if I just made everything worse by causing a scene. I stayed outside for maybe 10 or 15 minutes until I felt calm enough to go back in. When I returned, people had gone back to their quiet conversations. But I caught several people looking at me when they thought I wasn't looking. I had no idea what they were thinking. Were they judging me for losing my temper? Did they understand why I snapped? Did they agree with me or think I was out of line? I never found out. Nobody said anything to me about it that day. About 6 months ago, we hired someone new to head our finance department. She was in her early 30s, always dressed like she walked out of a fashion magazine, and carried herself with this air of superiority that rubbed me the wrong way from day one. She made it clear she thought she was better than everyone else in the office. She'd park in the CEO's reserved spot and act like the rules didn't apply to her. She'd interrupt people in meetings and talk over anyone who tried to contribute ideas. Within weeks of her arrival, I started noticing small discrepancies in our accounts. Nothing huge at first. A few $100s here and there that didn't quite match up with the invoices I was processing. Then I spotted an invoice for office supplies totaling $840 that seemed odd. I called the vendor to confirm and they had no record of the order. I brought it up to her during one of our weekly meetings. I told her I had found some inconsistencies in last month's expense reports and that the invoices didn't match what was actually paid out. She dismissed me immediately and said I must have made an error when I entered them. She told me to double-check my work before wasting her time. Her tone was condescending, like I was an idiot who couldn't do basic math. I went back and triple-checked everything. The errors weren't mine. The numbers she had approved didn't match the actual vendor invoices. But every time I tried to bring it up, she dismissed me or blamed it on my supposed incompetence. She started giving me extra work as punishment for questioning her. I'd stay late finishing reports while she left early for personal appointments. Then about 4 months ago, she announced she was getting married. She made sure everyone in the office knew about it. She spent more time planning her wedding than actually working. She'd take personal calls at her desk for hours, talking to caterers and florists and venues. She'd leave early for dress fittings and cake tastings. She'd come in late on Mondays because she'd been looking at honeymoon destinations all weekend. Meanwhile, the rest of us had to pick up her slack. The discrepancies in the accounts kept getting bigger. We were talking thousands of dollars now. I found a payment for $12,000 to a consulting firm I'd never heard of. Another invoice showed $9,500 for IT services that our actual IT department knew nothing about. I started keeping my own records, documenting every transaction that didn't add up. I noticed a pattern. The money was being funneled through fake vendor accounts, invoices for services that were never actually provided, payments to companies that didn't seem to exist when I looked them up. I spent my lunch breaks calling these supposed vendors. Half the phone numbers were disconnected. The other half led to businesses that had never worked with our company. One of them was a bakery that had no idea why they were listed as a software consultant on our invoices. I took my findings to our CEO. He was skeptical at first. He asked me if I was absolutely certain about these serious allegations. I told him I had documentation for everything. The invoices, the bank transfers, all of it. I explained that someone was stealing from the company, and I was pretty sure I knew who. I showed him the spreadsheet I created tracking every suspicious transaction. He looked through it for a long time without saying anything. He thanked me and said he'd look into it. I didn't hear anything for weeks. I was starting to think nothing would come of it. She kept acting like she owned the place, bossing everyone around and treating us like we were beneath her. She got worse as her wedding approached. She'd snap at people for minor things and blame others when she made mistakes. She approved herself for a bonus of $15,000 that nobody else received. Her wedding was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at some fancy hotel ballroom across town. She invited the entire office. Most people felt obligated to go since she was their boss. She'd been talking about how the wedding cost over $100,000. She bragged about the imported flowers and the fancy dress that cost $8,000. She mentioned the open bar and the 5-course meal and the live band. I certainly wasn't planning on attending. I had zero interest in celebrating someone I was pretty sure was a thief. But then on that Friday afternoon, the CEO called me into his office. He told me he wanted to thank me personally. He said my investigation was thorough and accurate. He explained they'd been working with law enforcement for the past few weeks and that the police were going to make an arrest tomorrow. My jaw dropped. I asked him if he meant tomorrow as in her wedding day. He confirmed that was when they decided to move. He explained that she was planning to leave the country for her honeymoon and the police were concerned she might not come back. She'd booked a 3-week trip to the Maldives. The police had been monitoring her accounts and discovered she'd been transferring money to offshore accounts. They needed to arrest her before she left the country. I didn't go to the wedding, but several of my co-workers did. They filled me in on every detail when they came back to work on Monday. According to them, the ceremony went off without a hitch. She looked beautiful in her expensive gown. The venue was decorated with thousands of dollars worth of flowers. Everything was perfect and over the top. The kind of wedding that probably cost more than most people make in a year. They had just finished the ceremony and were about to head into the reception when the police showed up. It was around 4:15 in the afternoon. Multiple officers walked right into the ballroom in full uniform. Everyone thought it was some kind of surprise entertainment at first, maybe singing cops or something cheesy like that. One of the officers approached her directly. The officer told her they had a warrant for her arrest for embezzlement and fraud. The entire room went silent. Her new husband looked completely confused. Her mother started screaming. Her father tried to intervene and asked what was going on. The guests were pulling out their phones to record everything. She tried to act innocent. She insisted there must be some mistake and that this was her wedding day. The officer told her there was no mistake and that she needed to come with them now. Another officer started reading her rights. They handcuffed her right there in front of everyone. Her veil got caught on one of the officers' badges as they led her away. She was crying and protesting the whole time, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. She screamed that someone had set her up. She blamed the accounting department for making errors. Her husband just stood there in shock, not saying a word. The reception never happened. The guests slowly filed out, whispering and gossiping about what they'd just witnessed. The food went to waste and the DJ packed up early. The hotel staff looked confused about what to do with everything. When Monday came around, the office was buzzing with gossip. Everyone who attended the wedding couldn't stop talking about it. Those who didn't go wished they had been there to see it firsthand. People were shocked that she'd been stealing from the company the whole time. Several co-workers came forward with their own stories about how she'd treated them badly. The investigation revealed she'd stolen over $73,000 from the company over the course of 6 months. She'd used it to fund her lavish lifestyle and her over-the-top wedding. She'd set up fake vendor accounts, approved fraudulent invoices, and pocketed the money for herself. The forensic accountants found she'd been planning this for months. before she even started working here. She'd done the same thing at her previous job and left before anyone caught on. She was charged with multiple counts of embezzlement and fraud. Her bail was set at $200,000. She couldn't pay it. Her husband had already filed for an annulment. He claimed he had no idea about any of it and felt betrayed. Her family had disowned her after finding out she'd also stolen money from her grandmother's trust fund. As for me, I got a promotion and a raise for catching the fraud. The CEO personally thanked me again and said my attention to detail had saved the company from losing even more money. He gave me a bonus of $5,000 and made me the new head of the finance department. Getting arrested at your own wedding has to be one of the worst possible ways for karma to catch up with you. I moved into my dorm room at the start of sophomore year, and honestly, I was pretty happy about it. Same room as last year, which meant I didn't have to deal with the chaos of housing reassignments or getting stuck with some random roommate situation. It was a single quiet, and I knew exactly where everything was. What I didn't anticipate was becoming the unofficial backup line for the most popular pizza joint near campus. See, back in the mid-90s, each dorm room had its own phone number with an on-campus extension. If you wanted to call off campus, you had to dial 9 first. Then you'd dial the actual number. For local calls, you didn't even need the area code. Pretty straightforward, right? Well, apparently not for half the student body after they'd been drinking. The pizza place everyone ordered from was this spot called Mario's Pizza. Great pizza, fast delivery, open late. Perfect for college kids. The problem was that if you forgot to dial the 9 before calling Mario's, guess whose phone rang instead? Mine. The first time it happened, I thought it was just the wrong number. Some guy slurring his words asked if he could get a large pepperoni and some breadsticks. I politely told him he'd reached the dorm room, not Mario's, and that he needed to dial 9 first. He apologized and hung up. No big deal. Then it happened again, and again, and again. Most of the time, people were decent about it. They'd realize their mistake, laugh it off, and thank me for the correction. I got pretty good at my little script. I'd tell them this wasn't Mario's Pizza, and they forgot to dial 9 for off-campus. Sometimes they'd apologize profusely, clearly embarrassed. Other times they'd just hang up immediately. Either way, it became part of my routine. But after months of this, I was getting pretty tired of it. I'm talking multiple calls some nights, especially on weekends. I'd be trying to study or sleep, and my phone would ring with someone demanding extra cheese or asking about delivery times. It wore thin. Thursday nights were the worst because that's when most students had finished their week and started partying early. Friday and Saturday nights were bad too, but Thursday had this specific energy where people were just letting loose after a tough week. I got in calls at midnight, at 1 in the morning, even at 2:30 in the morning once. The pattern was always the same. Phone rings, someone asks for pizza. I correct them. They apologize or get annoyed. Repeat. One Friday night, probably around 1 in the morning, my phone rang yet again. I picked it up, already knowing what was coming. The guy on the other end immediately started rattling off an order. I cut him off mid-sentence and told him pretty sharply that he'd forgotten to dial 9 and this wasn't the pizza place. He asked if I was serious. I confirmed that, yeah, I was serious. This was a dorm room and he needed to dial 9 first. He said something about how ridiculous this was and hung up. I went back to what I was doing, figured that was that. About a minute later, my phone rang again. Same guy. I recognized his voice immediately. He launched right into his order like nothing had happened. Said he needed 2 large pizzas, one with pepperoni and sausage, the other with mushrooms and olives. Also wanted an order of wings. I paused. He'd called back. He'd forgotten the 9 again, and he clearly hadn't learned his lesson the first time. Something in me snapped. I decided, you know what? Fine. I'll take your order. I asked him what kind of sauce he wanted on those wings. He said buffalo, medium. I confirmed I had it and asked if there was anything else. He said that was it and wanted to know how long it would take. I told him about 45 minutes to an hour. He asked for the total. I made up a number on the spot and told him $32. He said that sounded good and asked if they took cash. I told him, yeah, cash was fine. He thanked me and hung up. I sat there staring at the phone, half amused and half amazed that I'd actually just done that. I scribbled down the order on a piece of scrap paper, mostly just to see if he'd call back. Part of me thought he'd realize his mistake when the pizza never showed up. Part of me didn't care. I went back to studying, then eventually got ready for bed. About an hour later, just when I was starting to drift off, the phone rang again. I picked it up. He asked where his pizza was. Said he'd ordered like an hour ago. I almost laughed. He'd called the wrong number 3 times in one night. 3 times. And now he was mad that his imaginary pizza hadn't arrived. I told him, oh, the driver left about 5 minutes ago and should be there soon. He sounded relieved and thanked me again. Then he asked which dorm building I was sending it to. I realized he hadn't even given me an address. I asked him where he was. He said he was in the North Residence Hall, room 214. I told him, yeah, the driver should be there any minute now. He thanked me one more time and hung up. I put the phone down, unplugged it from the wall, and went to sleep. Best night's rest I'd had in weeks. The next morning I plugged the phone back in and went about my weekend. Around noon my phone rang. I picked it up, half expecting another pizza order. Instead, it was a girl asking if I was the one who took a pizza order last night. I asked her why she wanted to know. She said her friend had been waiting for a pizza that never came and he was convinced someone had stolen it or messed up the order. She wanted to know if I worked for Mario's or something. I told her no, I didn't work for Mario's. I explained that her friend had called my dorm room 3 times by forgetting to dial 9. And after the second time, I just decided to take his order. There was a pause on the other end. Then she started laughing. She told me her friend had been complaining all morning about how Mario's had screwed up his order. He'd even walked over there earlier to ask about it, and they had no record of his call. She said she'd called to see if maybe he'd gotten the number wrong, and now it all made sense. I asked if he was mad. She said he was more embarrassed than anything. She thanked me for clearing it up and said she'd let him know what happened. Before she hung up, she mentioned that he owed her $10 for covering his food after the pizza never showed up. I never heard from that guy again, though I can only imagine what happened when his friend told him the truth. The calls from other people kept coming for the rest of the year, of course. But after that night, I started having a little more fun with it. If someone was rude or called back after I'd already corrected them, I'd occasionally take their order and send them on their way. Nothing malicious, just a little reminder to pay attention to what you're dialing. One time, I even took an order for 3 pizzas and told the guy it would be 40 minutes. He called back an hour and a half later, asking where his food was. I told him the driver must have gotten lost. Another time, someone called asking about their delivery at 2 in the morning. I told them we were closed for the night and they'd have to call back tomorrow. They apologized and hung up without even questioning it. I figured if they couldn't be bothered to dial 9, they couldn't be bothered to get their pizza either. By the end of the year, I perfected my fake pizza employee voice. I could take orders, quote fake prices, and give estimated delivery times without even thinking about it. My roommate from the year before had warned me about the phone situation, but I never thought it would become this much of a thing. When I finally moved out at the end of sophomore year, I left a note for whoever got the room next. It just said, if people call asking for Mario's pizza, they forgot to dial 9. Or you can have some fun with it. Your choice. I still remember the day my parents showed me their new place. They had finally decided to downsize after years of rattling around in that big house on 1.5 acres. My brother and I had both moved out of state for work, and they were getting older. Maintaining all that property was just too much for them anymore. The yard work alone was taking my dad entire weekends to finish. The house had become too big with just the 2 of them there. They found this manufactured home community that was 55 and older only. They bought the actual house but still had to pay a $700 lot fee every month. At first I thought that sounded like a lot, but when my mom started showing me around the community amenities, I understood why. These people had it made. There was an indoor pool, an actual indoor pool, a full gym, a library with thousands of books, this massive rec room that could fit over 150 people with an industrial kitchen attached to it. The whole place was like a resort. My parents had downsized their living space but upgraded their lifestyle. My mom was so excited to show me everything. She grabbed my arm and pulled me from building to building like a kid on Christmas morning. She kept talking about all the activities they had planned. There were movie nights every Friday, potluck dinners once a month, exercise classes in the mornings. When we got to the gym, she opened the door and gestured for me to look inside. The room was huge. I mean, really huge. It had every piece of equipment you could think of: treadmills, weight machines, free weights, bikes, and way in the back, a rowing machine. There was only one person in there using the equipment. An older woman was on that rowing machine pulling the handle back and forth in a steady rhythm. My mom leaned over and told me quietly that she would like to make friends with her. My mom has always been active for her age. She was 74 at the time and still loved a good workout. It is hard to find people her age who enjoy the same things. So I understood why she was excited to see someone else in there being active. She mentioned that most of the women she had met so far only wanted to play cards or do crafts. That was it. We literally just stood in the doorway for maybe 10 seconds. Then we turned to leave so we could go get my dad from the library. He had been browsing the history section while we toured the rest of the facilities. We had barely made it 3 steps out the door when I heard footsteps running up behind us. The woman from the rowing machine appeared in front of us. Her face was red and she was breathing hard. Not from the rowing, from anger. She pointed her finger right in my face and started yelling at me. She told me that this was a 55 and older community only. She said I had to leave right now. I looked at my mom. My mom looked at me. We were both confused. My mom tried to explain to her. She told the woman that she was just showing me around her new neighborhood. She said that she had just moved in here 2 weeks ago. She explained that I was her daughter and that we were not using any of the facilities. We were just looking. The woman did not care, not even a little bit. She told my mom that she did not care who I was. She said I did not belong here and that I needed to get out. She said the rules were clear and that visitors under 55 were not allowed in the amenity buildings. Before I could even respond, she put both hands on my shoulders and physically shoved me backward out the door. I stumbled and almost fell. What the hell was wrong with this woman? I was not some teenager sneaking in to use the pool. I was visiting my mother. My mom is one of those people who hates confrontation. She will do anything to keep the peace. So instead of standing up to this lunatic, she asked me to please just wait outside while she went to get my dad from the library. She looked embarrassed and upset. I could tell she was worried about making enemies in her new community. I stood there in the hallway, fuming, while my mom scurried off. I wanted to march back in there and tell that woman exactly what I thought of her, but I knew it would just upset my mom more. So I waited. The whole thing was absurd. I was 54 years old, in 11 months to be exact. I was literally weeks away from being 55 myself. Even if their stupid rule applied to guests, which I highly doubt it did, I was basically the same age as everyone else there. When my mom came back with my dad, I told him what happened. My dad was furious. He said he wanted to go find the woman and give her a piece of his mind. He started walking back toward the gym, but my mom begged us both to just let it go. She said she did not want to start drama in her new community on day one. She reminded us that they had to live here and she did not want to be known as troublemakers. So we left. But I was angry for weeks afterward. Every time I thought about that woman putting her hands on me and shoving me, my blood boiled. My parents settled into their new place over the next few months. My mom made friends. My dad joined some club that played cards twice a week. They seemed happy. They went to the pool regularly. My mom started attending yoga classes on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, but they would occasionally mention that woman. Apparently, she had a reputation. She was rude to everyone. She complained constantly. She tried to enforce rules that did not even exist. She called the management office at least twice a week about something. Someone parked too close to her house. Someone had their grandkids visit for too long. Someone was playing music too loud at 3 in the afternoon. She acted like she owned the place. My mom said other residents had started avoiding her completely. When she walked into the rec room, people would suddenly remember they had somewhere else to be. Then about a year after they moved in, my mom called me with an update. The woman was gone. Not just moved away, kicked out. Apparently, she had pissed off so many people in the community that when her land lease came up for renewal, they refused to renew it. The community had the right to do that if a resident was causing problems, and she had caused plenty. She was forced to move out by law. The final straw had been when she called the police on a family having a birthday party for their grandson. She claimed they were violating the age restrictions. The police showed up and told her that visitors were allowed and that she was wasting their time. The management company had enough documentation of complaints about her to justify not renewing her lease. Her house sat on the market for over a year. No one wanted to buy it. Word had gotten around about what kind of neighbor she had been. People in the community warned potential buyers. They would tell them about the crazy woman who used to live there. Eventually, it sold for almost $20,000, less than similar homes in the community. When my mom told me all this, I felt satisfied in a way I had not expected. That woman had been so cruel and so unreasonable for no reason. She had made my mom feel unwelcome in her own new home. She had put her hands on me, and in the end, her nastiness had caught up with her. She had made herself so unbearable that she lost her home and her community, all because she could not mind her own business and treat people with basic decency. My mom said the whole community felt lighter after she left. People were friendlier. The activities had better attendance. Nobody was afraid of being reported for imaginary rule violations anymore. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.